Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have this conversation and share some fun stories, tips, and insights with you. Let's get started. So, I had this cooking episode recently where I ran into a shortage of chestnuts. I was preparing this family favorite dish called chestnut and mushroom risotto. It's a hearty and earthy dish with a rich, creamy texture, and the chestnuts really add that sweet, nutty flavor that balances the mushrooms perfectly. The occasion was a family gathering, and I wanted to prepare something that would feel both comforting and festive. Chestnuts, for those who don't know, are these lovely, starchy nuts that are often roasted or used in savory dishes. They're really popular around the holidays, especially in Washington where we use them in everything from stuffings to soups. I personally love incorporating them into baked goods or roasted vegetable sides too. But on this particular day, when I went to the market to pick up chestnuts, there were none. I couldn't just substitute something else, so I had to get really inventive with how I approached this dish. Now, instead of just swapping in another nut, I wanted to keep the essence of the dish intact. I thought about what chestnuts really bring to the table: texture, sweetness, and that earthy warmth. So, I decided to make a caramelized mushroom and squash puree. The squash added that same hint of sweetness and starchiness, while the caramelization gave a richness and depth that mimicked the roasted chestnuts. I also made a crispy topping with toasted oats and wild mushrooms for a little texture contrast, which helped create a really well-rounded bite. The final dish turned out amazing, and even though there were no chestnuts, the flavors were spot on. It was definitely a proud kitchen moment for me.
Wow, Emily, that sounds absolutely delicious. I love how you used squash and caramelized it to bring out the same sweetness chestnuts would offer. I can imagine how cozy and hearty that risotto must have been. Do you think this new version will become a permanent alternative for you, or are you sticking with chestnuts when they're available?
That's a great question, Jennifer. I think chestnuts still have a unique flavor that's hard to fully replicate, but the squash alternative is definitely going into my toolkit for times when chestnuts aren't in season where I can't find them.
Emily, I'm with Jennifer here. Their resourcefulness is amazing. I'm curious though, when you were toasting the oats for the crispy topping, how did you get the texture just right? It sounds like a delicate balance.
All thanks, my toasting oats is all about low and slow. I used a bit of olive oil and kept them on low heat, stirring constantly until they turned a light golden brown. Then I let them cool, which helps them crisp up perfectly.
That's incredible, Emily. I love when creativity like that pays off. You mentioned the texture of chestnuts. How important is that in the risotto? Do you think people would notice the difference right away if they know what chestnuts taste like?
Definitely, Sarah. Chestnuts have a unique meaty texture that adds a lovely bite to the risotto. People who know chestnuts well might notice the difference, but I tried to maintain that balance with the mushrooms and crispy toppings.
I'm so impressed, Emily. I know how challenging it can be to improvise when you're missing a key ingredient. Do you have any tips for others who might run into ingredient shortages?
Thanks, Chloe. My main tip would be to really think about the function of the missing ingredient, what flavor, texture, or feeling it brings to the dish, and then get creative with ingredients that offer similar qualities. Don't be afraid to mix and match until it feels right.
I love where this conversation is going, and I totally agree with what you said about creativity, Emily. Now, when it comes to buying chestnuts, I always look at freshness first. I usually buy them in the fall, around Thanksgiving, and use them for stuffing. You've got to make sure they're plump and have smooth, glossy skins. If they're too dry or wrinkled, they're past their prime. The last thing you want is a bitter chestnut.
I agree, Chloe. Freshness is key. I would add that for me, especially with organic farming. It's important to consider the source. I buy chestnuts from local farms when I can, as I know the care that goes into their production. In Texas, chestnuts might not be as common as pecans, but finding a local grower ensures the quality. Look for chestnuts that are firm to the touch, without soft spots.
That's so true, Jennifer. When I'm buying chestnuts here in California, I pay attention to the weight. A good chestnut should feel heavy for its size, and if it rattles when you shake it, it's likely dried out inside. I love using them in soups and roasts, but you've got to be sure they're full of moisture to get that creamy texture.
Excellent points, Sarah. I would add that storage is another crucial factor. I always ask how they've been stored at the market because chestnuts can go bad quickly if not refrigerated. I use them in empanadas here in Florida, and trust me, you don't want to open up a bad chestnut when you're cooking for customers.
You're also right, and another thing I check is the color. Here in Washington, we usually get darker, almost mahogany-colored chestnuts. That rich color usually indicates the good flavor. Lighter or dull chestnuts might have been sitting around too long. I love roasting them for that sweet, smoky flavor.
Speaking of alternatives, when chestnuts aren't available in Texas, I often turn to pecans. They are abundant here and add a rich, buttery flavor to dishes. They don't have the starchiness of chestnuts, but they're great in stuffing or salads. Plus, pecans have a sweeter, more mellow taste compared to the earthiness of chestnuts.
In Florida, I've used plantains as an alternative. They can be starchy and slightly sweet when cooked, especially when caramelized. They don't have that nutty richness, but they add great texture and pair well with savory dishes like empanadas or tostones.
I've tried using hazelnuts as an alternative here in New York. They've got a similar crunch and earthy flavor, but they're more robust than chestnuts. I'll grind them up for pestos or stuffings, but they don't have that same creamy, starchy quality.
Over in California, I've used roasted almonds in place of chestnuts. They add a nice crunch and a bit of a smoky flavor when roasted, though they're definitely denser. They work well in salads and roasted veggie dishes, but you won't get that soft textured chestnuts offer.
Thanks so much, everyone. It was so interesting hearing your thoughts on chestnuts and all the alternatives you've used in your cooking. Chloe, you talked about checking freshness. Jennifer, you highlighted sourcing locally. Sarah, you focused on weight and moisture. And Maya, you reminded us about the importance of storage. I really appreciate all the great insights you've shared today. And that wraps up our conversation. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you learned something new about chestnuts, and maybe even feel inspired to try out some of the alternatives we discussed. Take care and see you next time.